Hi lovely folks. Today we're going to be talking about how to measure yourself well and how to measure other folks that you may be making for. We'll be talking about which measurements you need and what to keep in mind as you're taking them. We'll also touch on how each measurement is used when making your pattern diagrams, but we'll talk about that more fully in the next episode. This video focuses on the measurements that you're going to need for tunics and dresses, sometimes also called kirtles, sarks, serks. There's a variety of terms, but either way, the only difference really between the two when we're talking about a basic kit is the length and the circumference of the hem. So this guide will help you whichever you're making. There is a PDF that goes along with this guide. You'll find it down in the description that contains a little bit more written information for you. A diagram to remind you of which bits we're measuring with which section, and also a measurement record sheet that you can use to record your measurements. This also has another column where you can write down the size that you're actually going to cut your pattern pieces. So have a look at that and we'll talk more about that in the next episode. Before we get stuck in, let's chat through a few basics. Now, getting this good set of measurements is the essential first step in making sure that what you're making for yourself and other people is going to fit well. Editing weirdling here. The dress I'm wearing here is very loose on me. Don't panic. We're going to be making garments that fit much better. This was my first proper attempt at making a wool dress, and as a beginner I was terrified of making it too small and wasting the precious fabric. Hopefully this video will help you avoid this particular problem. There are a variety of different measurements that you'll see on that record sheet and that we'll talk about today, and not every single one is going to be necessary when you're making your first basic garments. However, having the full set gives you a really nice idea of the overall shape of the person, and it allows you to go back and make more complex garments later on if you want to. Ideally, have somebody else help you with your measurements. It's totally possible to do your own, but it is a little bit trickier. So especially if you're first starting, grab a friend to help. Take each measurement twice. If you find a difference, take it again. And lastly, choose if you're working in inches or centimetres and stick to that for every measurement. It's important to be aware that being measured can be a very difficult thing for some people. They may not want to know the numbers that are coming off the tape measure. They may be uncomfortable being touched in intimate areas or some other combination of factors. Now, if they're a person that doesn't want anybody else touching them, you can send them this guide. They can take their measurements themselves in privacy and just send them to you. And having this guide, they'll know exactly what they need to measure and you'll get the right numbers. For somebody in a different situation who perhaps is happy for you to make them clothing and happy for you to measure them, but doesn't want to know what those numbers are, you can get around that by measuring behind and surreptitiously noting down the measurements. There's lots of different ways that people might need small adjustments to the process. So the important thing is to have a chat with the person you're measuring, check in as you go through to make sure everybody's happy and comfortable. Looking after your mental health matters, whether that's you're the measurer or the measuree. Now, one particular difficulty may be that somebody's not happy being touched around the chest or around the hips, in which case they can hold the tape measure. That's fine, and then all you do is read off the number so that they're comfortable and you're comfortable. We'll talk about that a bit more as we go on. Remember, if you're using elbow or knee guards or any other type of body padding or protection, you need to measure with those on. And the same goes if you're wearing a particularly effective bra or a binder. Measure with what you're going to be wearing under your kit on to get an accurate set of measurements. Now, bearing that in mind, if you're attending shows, you're going to be needing to wear this kit for 7 to 8 hours if you take into account the amount of time that you have to be ready before the show starts as well. So you need to be comfortable for that period of time. If you're going to be wearing the kit without those items underneath, then measure with them and without them and use the larger set of measurements for making your kit. This guide will cover all the measurements you need for making your basic tunics and dresses for your first kit. There's also some measurements in here that can be used for making more advanced pieces of kit later on. but we don't need to worry about those just yet. There will always be some overlap between different garments, but things like trousers and hose will cover those in their own videos. The record sheet that I've made contains a column for recording your raw measurements and then another one for recording what size you're going to cut your pattern pieces. As I said, we'll cover that process in detail in the next video, but recording in this way is really, really helpful because once you finish the garment, you can look at the fit and then you can compare the exact cuts you made so you know how to tweak it or how to reproduce it if you're exceptionally happy with it. For very new folks, here's a few sewing terms that you're going to hear throughout this video. Seam allowance is the extra fabric left on the insides of the garment after sewing, which is usually, in Viking age garments, felled down to add strength to the seam. This must be added in when drawing out your pattern or the resulting garment will be too small. Ease refers to how much extra fabric is used over the body measurements to make the garment comfortable to move in. For simple garments, you'll mostly work with positive ease, i.e. additional width or length. Armscye refers to the seam between the shoulder and the sleeve. On modern garments, it's a shaped curve. On most basic Viking age garments, this join is not shaped. Felling refers to a seam treatment, which gives a flat, strong finish to the raw edges of the fabric. The seam allowance is folded back on itself, sometimes folded under, and whip stitched down onto the fabric, enclosing the raw edges to prevent fraying. For more information on hand stitching and seam treatments, please see my beginner's guide to Viking age stitching here. So, for measurement A, either A1 or A2, we're going to be measuring for the full length of our tunic or dress. You're measuring yourself, you're going to begin by taking the number 1 end of your tape measure, finding the highest point of your shoulder, it's usually about 1 inch or so away from your neck, and holding that in place there. Now if you're wearing a t-shirt, you'll find that it's along the top seam there. What we're going to do is we're going to measure all the way down our front. Make sure you're happy with that there, all the way down. And when you're measuring yourself, if you don't have a friend to help you with this, I find standing on the tape measure, just bringing it up until there's no slack, but it's not pulled tight and it's not slack either. Start off, once you're happy with the position, hold it in place, hold it in place. Before you start to bend, hold it onto your leg. Come all the way down and you can read off the length that you want your dress or tunic to be. Now, if you're making a tunic, you're going to want this to be just below your knee. So for me, my knee is here. That is going to be the finished length I'm going to aim for a tunic. For a dress, it's going to come down further. Now, this particular dress comes down right the way to the floor. Pretty much when I'm wearing my shoes, it doesn't go much above that. That is because this is an Anglo-Saxon dress, and in Christianized society, showing one's ankles was not the done thing. Now, whilst full length may be the historically correct version, a lot of people will go for something ever so slightly shorter, just below ankle length, so that it doesn't touch the floor and get muddy in the field. That choice is up to you. But what you want to make sure is that you're measuring right from the top of the shoulder all the way down, and that when you bend, so if you're doing it by yourself, it's very easy to bend down and, oh look, suddenly I'm 6 inches shorter. So make sure as you're coming down from that top point of your shoulder, that'll be the seam if you're wearing a standard t-shirt, that you come down over the fullest part of the chest, hold at the waist, very carefully down to the hips, without putting pressure on this, without pulling it back or pulling it forward, so that you can read off your measurement. Now you can see as soon as I start to bend over, that changes position. So you can walk your hands down even more carefully. And yep, once again, my measurement's correct. Always do it twice, even do it 3 times. Push the boat out. My glamorous assistant here is going to help me demonstrate measuring length on other people. So if you would very kindly hold the tape measure just there with this arm, please.
Okay.
If you can. Thank you very much. So we've got the positioning here along the top seam of the shirt. If you've already got a tunic, you can use your tunic to match that, or if you've just got a normal t-shirt, you can use the shoulder seam of that. So we're going to take the tape measure all the way down the front to the length we want our tunic. Now, excuse me touching your knees, this is about knee length for this chap. So that's where you're going to take your measurement. For later Anglo-Saxon tunics, you may want to make this a little bit longer. If you're measuring for a dress, you're going to be going all the way down to the ankle or to the floor, depending on which type of dress you're making. If you're making for a Christianised society, or you're making so that you don't get muddy hems in the LHG. As the fashionable medieval man will tell you, sometimes one wishes to pouch one's tunic over one's belt, in which case we need some modifications to where we cut the hem of this tunic. We're going to need to make it a fair bit longer, and I'll show you for why now. So as you can see here, this is the classic medieval poof over the belt. It's raised the hem of the tunic up quite high. So if you want your tunic to sit at the knee when it's pooched, I don't even know if that's the right word, but that's the word I'm giving it today, then you need to make sure when you're measuring that you add the distance that you're going to be taking up with that fold over the belt. So you would measure your length to about here, about 4 inches or so below the knee. The idea with your basic tunic or dress is to make something that you can wear all through the period. A tunic that's slightly too long is not going to be a problem. A tunic that's slightly too short might limit you in some periods. So for a male presenting character, on the knee or just below it is what you want to be aiming for. If you are an exceedingly high status Anglo-Saxon later on in the period, what you're going to be making is quite a bit longer. So if you're making a tunic, take your dress length as well, and that will allow you to pick somewhere in between if you're making higher status later period Anglo-Saxon clothing. The next measurement that we're going to take, letter B on the chart, is the full chest measurement. So this is the widest or fullest part of the chest that you're going to be measuring here. Now, as we talked about before, underneath this I am wearing what I plan to be wearing under my kit. And I'm going to come all the way around, overlap your tape measure, have a feel. It's a bit difficult if you're doing it on yourself. Sometimes you might want to have a mirror to the side just to try and make sure that this is nice and even. A little bit off isn't going to matter because we are going to add some ease across the chest. So what you want is a good approximation. Now, breathe in, let it out a little bit. If you're making a closer fitting garment, what you don't want is for that garment to be straining when you take a deep breath. For your basic kit, we're going to add enough ease that it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you've got the widest point of the chest and take that measurement. Okay, so when measuring chest circumference, this can be one of the measurements that people feel quite uncomfortable about. So if the person doesn't really want your hands fiddling around their chest area, this is how you measure them. So would you please take the tape measure and just pass it across the widest point at the front of your chest, please, and then hand me either end behind you. Yep. Just let me bring it this way a little bit. Thank you very much. Now, is that at the widest point of your chest there?
I believe so.
Okay, would you take a deep breath in for me? Brilliant. Thank you very much. So in doing that, will work as well for if you're taking the measurements of somebody who doesn't want to know what their chest measurement is. You can read it off to the side or at the back and note it down without having to say it out loud. And they've done all of the moving around at the front. You're just checking that it's at the right position. Get them to take a deep breath so that you're getting the biggest measurement for a comfortable fit. Next, we're going to take measurement C, and that is the natural waist measurement. Now, to find the point at which you're going to take this measurement, bend slightly to the side, and the bit in the middle, that's your natural waist. So that's what you need to know. So again, lay your tape measure over and read off at the correct number. Take a deep breath. If you're somebody whose stomach changes shape because of a medical condition, make sure you allow a little bit extra for that when you're taking this measurement. Now, we're only really going to use the waist measurement if it's larger than the chest measurement, and the same will go for the hips when we get to measuring those. But for now, get that measurement down so that you can compare all three at the end to decide which one you're going to use to decide the width for your main body piece. So if you would very kindly bend slightly to the side and find the bit when you bend that's right in the middle.
Yeah.
That's your natural waist. So if you could pass the tape measure across your front and pass me either end again at that line for me, that would be lovely. A bit further of this end, please. Lovely. Now let it all hang out, please. Take a nice deep breath. Perfect. Thank you very much. So once again, we've read off that measurement behind them. Now, some people won't mind at all. They'll be quite happy for you to be fiddling around. In that case, you don't have to worry about these things. But if somebody is a little bit sensitive about it, that's the way that you can get a nice accurate measurement and both of you feel a bit more comfortable. At this point, we're going to jump ahead slightly on the measurement record sheet. So if you've got that in front of you, have a look at it. If not, I'll put a little diagram up to show you which part I mean. You'll see section J has got space for two measurements, and the first one is shoulder. So we're going to lay that tape measure same place that we did when we was measuring the full length. I'm going to hold on to it with the other hand, and we're going to come down, find the point where our natural waist sits and measure down to it, straight down over the chest at the front there. Now that measurement is our shoulder to waist measurement, and that can help us decide where our gores are going to start. These side gores in the dress, which allow movement for the hips and for the feet, you need to know where to start those. So having that measurement from the shoulder to the waist will tell you where that's going to sit and how long these gore pieces need to be cut. And again, we're going to measure the shoulder to waist distance. So if you could very kindly hold that on your shoulder at the same position, come in a little way for me, thank you, lovely. And just show me on your body where you measured that waist measurement with one finger if you can. Okay, so we're going to read that off, and that is your shoulder to waist measurement. So when you're starting to put your gauze in, you can tell how far down they need to start. The next two measurements we're going to take are of the shoulders. Now, for most folks and in most garments, you're not going to need these measurements. But if you're making something a bit more complex that has a bit of shaping at the armholes, something like that, or you're dealing with a particularly well-muscled individual who might need a little bit of extra ease across the back of the shoulders, these measurements can be handy just for checking that everything's going to fit nicely at the end. So if you're wearing a t-shirt, if you put a normal t-shirt on that fits well, not too baggy, the arm seam will sit about here. That's kind of the most rounded point at the front of your shoulders, and that's the distance we're going to be measuring. So from about there to there, across the front, keep the tape measure nice and straight. That's your across shoulders front measurement. So make sure you get the same points on each side and measure straight across. The same thing across the back. This bit's hard to do by yourself, which is why I recommend having a friend help you out, but you can get a vague idea doing it yourself. Straight across, read it off, note it down. So now we're going to measure across the shoulder front, just as I showed you on myself, and across the shoulders at the back. So on this person, imagine they're wearing a t-shirt. Their t-shirt seam would sit about here. So we're going to go straight over the front, from shoulder to shoulder, keeping the tape measure nice and level to get that distance. Now again, this is one if a person's uncomfortable, that you can just have them hold it themselves. Either way will work. Would you mind turning round, please? If you could stand up nice and straight for me. Okay, and again, I'm measuring across the back. This is where you may find, if somebody is particularly muscular, that you might find there's a greater distance here to take into account. So once again, just going to measure between those 2 points on the shoulders there. Then we're going to move on to letter E, and that is the arm length. So this is the length that you're going to use when calculating the length of your sleeve piece. Now, depending on what character you're portraying and their status, you may need to tweak this. But if you get the basic measurement down, you can then work from that when you're deciding how much longer you want your sleeve piece to be. For later Anglo-Saxon characters, what we quite often find for higher status people is that there is a lot of ruffling here. So the sleeves will be extraordinarily long and get pushed back and ruffle up here. But for a basic tunic or dress, you want something that's going to be practical and not too short. Now, on this one, you can see when I hold my hand out straight, it actually comes down to around my thumb joint. So that's where we're going to measure to. We're going to find the top point of our shoulder, just about there. We are going to hold the tape measure there, and then guiding it down with our fingers, just pop it between your fingers like that. Have your hand to the side. When you're happy, grasp it tightly. Come back, and you can see for me it's about 23.5 inches, 23.5 inches to that thumb joint. Now, sleeves can be a little bit tricky when it comes to getting it exactly right, because what you'll notice here is we have what's called shoulder drop. This is inevitable with these types of basic tunics and dresses. You can't get away from it because the later tailoring that comes in with a shaped arm side, whilst we do see some of that towards the end of the Viking Age, most basic clothing does not have a shape here. It will be cut to the width of the body, and it will drop here, thus the name shoulder drop. So when you attach your sleeve, it's actually going to be a bit lower down than this point. Saying that, I always say to measure from here, because it's far better to have a sleeve that's a little bit long that you can cut and rehem if you need to, than have something that's too short that you then need to add an extra cuff to. Now, when we're measuring the length of the arm, as we talked about before, you'll see this shoulder drop here on this particular tunic. It doesn't sit right at the top. Now, if we're going to measure the arm length, this one's quite long, it's just a little bit lower than we would normally want it. Now, the thumb joint on this person here measures about 25.5 inches. Now, would you be very kind and lift your arm straight up to the side for me? This way, that's it. Keep coming. Now that measurement is 24.5, so there's quite a difference. You can come down now, thank you, between the arm when it's down by the side and when it's raised. So that's why we're going to measure all the way down with the arm by the side. Next, we're going to measure around the top of our bicep, so that's the widest part of the forearm. If you have a muscly person that you're measuring, make sure that they flex, because we need to make sure that there is enough room for all the muscles, or not, as the case may be, like me. So you find the widest part, you measure round. We are going to add some ease into this measurement, so you don't want to leave it too loose. You want to get it as close as you possibly can to the actual measurement of that part of the arm. Again, bend, make sure you're taking the widest measurement, note that down. This is going to help you to decide how large to make the top part of your sleeve piece. Next, we need to measure your bicep. So if you would very kindly stand like this for me and flex, I shall measure the widest point of your bicep area. Everybody's a little bit differently shaped, so I'm just moving the tape measure up and down there to make sure I've got the widest part. Thank you very much. Then we're going to measure the widest point on the forearm. Again, come all the way round, have them bend their arm up to see if that changes the measurement. Yes, it does. On me, it's about 1/2 inch difference between bent up like this and straight out like that. So measure round, find the widest point, have them bend their arm and read off at that point there. We're taking this forearm measurement for folks that want to be able to push their sleeves up. Basically, we are reenacting in very hot climates. It probably wasn't the way that it was done in the Viking Age. However, most people do want to be able to roll up their sleeves when they're getting down to dirty work or if they're extremely hot. So if the person wants to be able to roll up their sleeves, that forearm measurement is what we're going to use to size the bottom of the sleeves. That's what I've done for this one because I get extremely hot. Then measuring a forearm on another person, again, ask them to make sure that their muscles are flexed when you take this measurement. Make sure you've got the widest part and note down the measurement. And then we're going to measure around the wrist. Now, this actual measurement is not going to be used in most cases, but it does come in handy if you're making later period garments. So it's worth grabbing it just in case. Next, I'd like to measure your wrist, please.
Wrist.
Again, in most cases, you're not actually going to be using this measurement, but if you end up making something later on that does require some kind of sleeve closure, having this measurement is handy to have. Now, for most garments that you're making, to size the bottom of this sleeve, instead of using the forearm so that it can be pushed up, what we're going to be doing is using the smallest measurement that we can get our hand through. So to measure this hand hole, you're going to hold your hand out straight, thumb into the palm, and then measure around the widest point of the hand. It's a little bit tricky doing it on yourself, again, why a friend can come in handy. For me, it's about 8 1/4 inches. This is going to vary a lot from person to person, so it's a really important one to get. As long as you can get your hand through there, when you've finished your sleeve, it'll sit just comfortably about there. That's what we want to aim for. And finally, I need to measure the size of your hand hole, please. So if you could hold your hand out and put your thumb in the palm of your hand for me, as if you're putting it through a sleeve, I shall measure that. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to take measurement K, and this is the circumference of the longest stance. So if you're fighting and you're wearing a tunic, you're going to bring one knee forward and one knee back. Imagine there's an axe here. Have your tape measure behind you before you start, otherwise it's really awkward to try and get your legs round. And then I want you to measure around both knees at fullest extension. And this is going to give you your absolute minimum hem. You read off that measurement, and then when you're calculating how big you need to make your gore pieces, that's going to tell you how wide each one needs to be to make sure that the hem of your tunic is big enough to allow for free movement. If you're making a dress, instead of measuring around the knees, we're going to take a fairly normal step, bend slightly, and then measure all the way around our ankles instead. This gives you a minimum circumference. You can extend this as much as you need to if you plan to run or fight in your dress, and you may also need to make the gauze wider than this to fit your hips. Now, as I very awkwardly just showed you, measuring your stance yourself is quite tricky. This is how you do it on somebody else. If you'd kindly step up onto the table, sir, and assume a fighting stance, facing that way with one foot in front of the other. Imagine you're about to whack somebody with an axe. Now, is that as far as you're going to stretch your legs? Or do you...
Probably not.
No, so you give me a full stretch if it's possible on that table for you, which it may not be. Okay, so if you could pass this tape measure behind you and drop it down as far as you can, either side.
Where should I?
We need to come to knee level, please. I shall then take hold of the tape measure once it's in roughly the right place and lean. Lovely. So in taking that measurement, we've established the minimum circumference for the hem of this person's tunic. If I'm making a dress for them, instead of measuring around the knees, if you could take a normal stride, please. In this case, I would measure all the way around the ankles. Next, we're going to take measurement L. That's the base of the neck. And we're going to be measuring from where the neck meets the shoulder the same point on the other side, straight across. It's easiest if you do this in front of a mirror. You can hold your tape measure straight, don't let it curve. You can even use the ruler if you like and just do it visually. But you need to make sure that you're getting the measurement straight across there. And this is what you're going to use to decide the diameter of your neck hole when we cut it. Now, if you're measuring on somebody else, you can do this bit without a mirror, obviously, because you're not trying to do it on yourself. So we're going to measure across the base of the neck. Am I right to touch your neck? So where the neck and shoulder meet, just here, this distance straight across is what we want. So we're going to hold our tape measure up, excuse my head. We're just judging by eye the distance across. Now, it's a lot easier to do that when you're not trying to get out of the way of a camera, but just holding the tape measure up, checking by eye either side to make sure that you've got the correct circumference. No, that's the wrong word. Not radius either. What's the one that goes all the way across a circle?
Diameter.
That's it. Yes, you're getting the correct diameter for your neck hole. We're also going to take measurement M, which is the smallest circumference that our heads can comfortably pass through. To do this, we're going to wrap our tape measure around our forehead like so, and then we're going to wiggle it. Get your ears through. Yep, that'll do. Maybe a little bit looser. So hold on to it. Yep, that's how big I want my head hole to be. Now this gets a little bit complicated. Check out the pattern diagrams video for that, where we'll cover making neckline templates in much more detail. Now, what I'd like you to do next is place this tape measure around your head like so and wiggle it until you find the minimum distance around that your head can pass through.
Okay.
So pinch it together. It's easier to pinch it together at the front doing this rather than around the back. That's it, yeah. Around the back first. Lovely. So you start off quite tight and then you'll find your nose won't fit. So let it out a little way. Wiggle it down till it comes over your nose. That's it. That's about right. Read off that measurement for me.
25.
Cool. So as I explained earlier, that measurement is going to be used in calculating how long you need your keyhole slit. And we'll talk more about that in the pattern diagrams video. And finally, for measurement N, we're going to measure around the fullest point of the hips. Now, this is going to be different on everybody. We are all different shapes. So for me personally, it's about there. Some people will carry more weight further down. Find whichever measurement, moving up and down, is the choke point. So the point at which the tape measure is going, oh, yep, that's the one. Take some time, just find out where that is for you. Take that measurement and then, keeping your finger roughly at the point at which that was taken. It helps if you use your tape measure the right way round. Hold on to it, run your tape measure back up to that point at your shoulder that we keep coming back to. Straight down over the chest and measure how far down your main body piece that hip measurement was taken, so that you know on that person where is the widest part below the waist. The reason that's important is that your side gauze need to allow enough movement around the hips, not to pull, not to be tight. So when you're calculating how wide you're going to make your gauze, there's a little bit of maths needs doing at the top if your hip measurement is any wider than your chest. If you've got very slim hips, this isn't going to be an issue for you. You're not going to have to worry about doing these calculations. But if you are somebody who is wider of hip, then having these details, how far down and the widest point, is going to come in really handy when making your pattern diagram. And it'll make sure that you're not making something that is uncomfortable around the hips when you're finished. Now the last measurement again is going to be the hips. This is another one where people might feel a little bit uncomfortable with you fiddling around. So this is one where you can give them the tape measure and ask them to do it themselves. Now, are you happy for me to read your measurement out for your hips, or would you prefer that I did it behind you so you don't know what it is?
It's fine.
Okay. In that case, would you kindly take this tape measure and pass it around the widest point of your hips? You can start at the waist and wiggle it down until the point it gets widest to find it.
It was there.
Yep. Swing it around the front and then I can read off the measurement. Not too tight. Yep, it will escape, that happens. Okay, and can you comfortably slide that up and down to the sort of top of your belly, down over your bum? Yep.
Yep.
Looking good. Thank you very much. Now,
Okay.
can you find the point which you feel that's the tightest?
There.
Okay. So when you find that point, just mark it with your finger and then we're going to measure down to it.
Fiddly.
It is very fiddly, yes.
About there is the height,
The widest part.
widest part.
Okay, if you pop your finger on there then, one finger on that point and pass me the tape measure. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to measure down again from your shoulder to that point. Okay, so then you'd note that down in the section marked J in the second box for the hip, shoulder to hip distance. Thank you very much, my glamorous assistant. And we're done. Okay, I hope all of that made sense. If you've got any questions, pop them down in the comments or come and find me on Facebook. I want to thank everybody for their patience. I know this series is coming out a lot slower than originally planned, and that's down to my health not behaving, but it is all still coming, so thank you for bearing with me. The next episode is going to take these measurements and show you how to turn them into a pattern diagram for cutting out your fabric. So until I see you then, have a wonderful day, look after each other, and I will see you soon. Bye.